with you. Hi everyone. My name is Laura Dubourjal and I'm the coordinator of the lectorat Art Spatial Praxis at the Rhine Academy. And I'm very pleased to introduce the members of Loom practice for cultural transformation, which I think most of you, all of you, have just spent some hours with, cycling around Amsterdam Waterlands. And I got inspired by the project that they are going to present to you in a second, and thought that we could start with a little breathing exercise to arrive all together. I call it exercise, but it will be very simple. If we can all just take 3 deep breaths together to land in the space and find our rhythms. So I will be guiding the breaths. A deep breath in through the nose. You can close your eyes if you want to. And deep breath out. Next one in. And out. And the last one. And out. I wanted to thank you for joining us today, and I just had some few little thoughts in preparation for this event that I wanted to share. Throughout the residency that Loom just did with us at the lectorat, I've come to know their practice as both collaborative and deeply embodied. And something that really struck me was that as a collective, their work was extremely synergistic, but not strictly dependent on one another. Somehow it became very symbiotic. It extended through many methods: storytelling, listening exercises, sonic encounters, wetness walks, and rehearsals with water, to name a few. What I found about these rehearsals is that they're not simply preparations, but we receive them as invitations to unlearn and to relearn how to be a body with water. They reminded us that imagining the future of climate change requires more than analysis, but it requires the body, our senses, and our capacity to rehearse other ways of being. As Amitav Ghosh has written, the climate crisis is also a crisis of the imagination, and Loom responds to this crisis by generating alternative images and sensibilities, rethinking rivers beyond maps or diagrams, questioning the binaries of land and water, urban and rural, center and periphery. They proposed 5 artistic approaches to encountering water. They challenged us to bring our bodies into the conversation, to listen with all of our senses, and to imagine futures where we live with water, embracing its fluidity, its cycles, and its multiplicity. Their approaches bring forward the many dimensions of water itself: physical and visual, sensorial and sensual, conceptual and gender, geometrical, dominated and domineering, all at once. They remind us that water is everywhere, not only in the rivers and canals, but in the air we breathe, in the soil beneath us, in our bodies. In preparing for this event, I returned to Loom's website, to their portfolio, to their statement of values and conditions. And what struck me in rediscovering the latter especially, which you can also find online on their website, is the incredible integrity and authenticity of their words. These words are not abstract commitments, but practices that I've witnessed in each of them. Loom works in constant conversation with each other, with their partners, with us. They invite, they listen, they question. Being in collaboration with them has felt less like we were hosting them in our program, and more as if we were being welcomed into their own network of engagement and discussion. They're highly autonomous and independent, but very open and generous in how they share their work. And just to contextualize a little bit, the residency program, it's a part of a broader Climate Imaginaries trajectory in which we, partly the lectorat at the Rietveld Academy and other partners in other schools in the Netherlands, question how can artistic research help us understand the impact of rising sea levels, rethink our housing, our clothing, the soil we inhabit in relation to water. How can we generate images and practices that prepare us not only technically but imaginatively for the futures to come? And it also feels important for me to acknowledge that this evening is part of a longer cycle of collaborations. And Loom has invited Müge Yilmaz and Anne Dessing to join this project, who have been part of our trajectory before as previous artist in residency and collaborator with the Climate Imaginaries project. And at the Lectorat, we also see this event as part of a cycle of care that will extend today into the shared table that has been set up in the beautiful dome over there. Lila Bullen-Smith has prepared the bites and snacks for tonight, continuing her beautiful contribution to our gatherings. Some of you who might have been there last year might have remembered her salt-resistant bites that she created in dialogue with Müge's presentation of her project Salt. And these gestures remind us that the relationships we build here are not only about research and presentation, but also about sustaining one another through food, through time, and through long-term exchange. With Leaky Turns, Loom invited us into the stories from Amsterdam's Waterlands and into a practice of reimagining with water. I'm very grateful to welcome them, and I hope that you will join me in listening with openness and curiosity. Thank you very
much. Thank you so much, Laura, for the breathing exercise, but also for maybe your first of all, for the conversation and dialogue over the last year, which I think also from our side has been very enjoyable, and we learned a lot from you two, all of you, which I will name a bit later. But also I think it's really nice for us to hear how you are maybe reading what we are trying to do, of course, with others. But I mean, we've been calling ourselves Loom for a few years, but I think this is maybe the first time that we hear other people not just reading what we wrote maybe as a bio, but it was really nice to hear actually. So yeah, that's nice to hear that written. It was also nice, I think you said Leaky Turns, or that's what I understood, and I was like, maybe we should update our terms or like the values and conditions to leaky terms and good work. Yeah. To be continued. But thank you very much, Laura, also Patricia, who's not here, Inte, Shervez, in the back. And maybe just a few more words about who we are. My name is Katia Truijen, and I'm part of this Loom collective. This is Mark, I think Jan. We also have René Hoer in the back, and there's Michiel van Iersel in the yellow jacket, the rain jacket, because we are preparing for rain today, and we actually got some, which is great. And indeed, we call ourselves a practice for cultural transformation, because we feel that the looming questions that we are facing, and one of them, of course, is the looming rise of the water that is coming from all sides, that these also need, as you also brought the beautiful quote, but that it also needs us to imagine differently, and for that there's also cultural transformations are needed. So we need artistic imaginaries, cultural perspectives to move forward. So sometimes we curate and facilitate dialogues through cultural means, and sometimes we also initiate our own research and projects, such as the one that we are presenting to you today. Both the Rhine River rehearsal, and you see some of the publications, or cahiers as we call them, already lying around, and also the Leaky Turns audio tour that many of you joined us today, which was very nice to enjoy these Amsterdam Waterlands together. So a few words about this larger project. The Rhine River rehearsal, it's an ongoing project for us, an artistic research journey in which we engage with the Rhine as a complex and ever-changing environment that is both affected by but also contributes to a rapidly changing climate. And this indeed has been one of the studios of the Climate Imaginaries program. We also, through this project, collaborated with the Goethe Institute. We have Viola and Martina also here, so also thank you for this long conversation there. And we also presented one of the rehearsals and the wetness walks with you. Also, we were collaborating with the Waterlands residency program, where we joined as a nomadic residency, and where we stayed at Campingplatz Gieteroord with Judith and Valentine, so also thanks to them. And I want to thank Buka and also Tobias for hosting us here. I don't know if you want to say a few words about where we are. Maybe this is the right moment for it, or if you prefer to.
You say that this is the right moment.
This is the right moment.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to quickly thank you all for coming and welcome you to the place. Briefly, what we do here, I'm curious how it comes out of my mouth this time, because for the past 13 years the story is always kind of evolving. But in general, Buurtwerkplaats Noorderhof is a neighborhood workshop, and we kind of see that in a very concrete way, but also in a more figurative way. So together with people from the neighborhood, together with artists, together with social organizations, schools, researchers, everybody's welcome. We don't use any target groups. So together with all these people, we kind of shape society in a really small, humble way, and we do that with the tools that art and design and crafts and just in general making things has to offer for that. So whenever you walk through the gate here, you will find new people every time, new initiatives every time, new projects every time, and depending on who you ask, you will get a very different definition from what this place actually is. You might have noticed there's no sign on the door that says this is what this is and this is what you can do there. That's kind of a design choice as well, because we want people to come in and go like, what is this place? What could it mean to me? How can I use it? And put people in that frame of mind. Just as the same as is happening now, as I've heard people talking like, well, this seems kind of nice. Is it like this? Is it like that? So it's also about creating and designing a space that is kind of unexpected or something like that.
Thanks.
That's it.
Yeah. Thanks for having us here, and hopefully we are allowed to come back as well.
Always.
I also wanted to thank Leila already, who is from Brackish Collective and will also present some snacks later on. And also I wanted to thank John for the beautiful visuals and the designs for the Leaky Turns podcast, and also Caroline, who worked with us on the design of the cahier. So the project is called Rhine River Rehearsal. First of all, because we feel there's a need to collectively rehearse different approaches to living with water. And we also see the project as a rehearsal of a different vocabulary maybe, as we try to find notions and images and other forms that can help us to describe or sense what we are facing. And maybe this presentation can be considered a rehearsal too, as we would like to discuss with you this attempt perhaps, and so we're looking forward to also a conversation after. And maybe you want to think about if there's any ideas or stories or fragments or images that you think may be useful, that you would like to take with you as we continue to rehearse for what's coming. This is us on our journey. So these are the two things we will discuss today, but maybe Mark, you want to say why we are really here?
Yeah. I think you already mentioned part of it, right? Because we are exploring different attitudes of how to relate to water, how to live with water, live with wetness, kind of, because we think this deeply rooted narrative of water management and control. I mean, it's so ingrained in, well, definitely Dutch culture, that we need to unlearn it, as you also mentioned. We need to find new ways of relating to water, to wetness, because this kind of binary approach will not hold in the coming decades, and in the expected increase in floods, but also in extreme droughts and other circumstances that we need to kind of relearn to relate to. And I think also by extension for us as a culture to continue to explore for the decades to come and find new ways of being, of living together, of organizing, of building, etc. So this image is interesting. I think I know for sure. We feel through it. It's and the way I interpret it is that we are currently more or less here in this era of modernity, which is a temporary situation, as all things are. But this is one scenario, right, of more or less a century into the future, where the Netherlands will be more like Netherlands again, like parts or larger parts of it submerged by water, which is a very real scenario that we need to consider and rehearse for. So I'm going to read it from here, this part. So we're interested in this notion of wetness as described by landscape architects Anuradha Mathur and Dilip Cunha, that questions the man-made division between water and land. And they ask how to live in a world of ubiquitous wetness. Which brings us to the start of this journey.
Exactly. So, as 5 bodies, we traveled along but also deviated from the Rhine River last year during 5 days. We were questioning its geography, and all the 5 of us brought a different perspective and approach to the river. And maybe so we were preparing a bit, but then we were maybe I can read a bit about the start of the journey. On a warm summer day in September 2024, 5 people plopped down in the grass next to a ruin of a factory where bricks were once manufactured under great heat. From different locations in the Netherlands, Amsterdam, Alphen aan de Rijn, Rotterdam, the 5 individuals embarked on a journey along and across the Rhine. They gather on the grass of the Ooipolder to collectively make a start with their journey. The start is fueled by imagination, memory, and some questions. Where do land and water come together for you? Can you share a recent memory, an image of this? And with their eyes closed in a circle, backs laying down in the grass, various voices and stories mingle about a dewdrop on the balcony, a leakage in the kitchen, swimming in the Mediterranean. And now they are on the move, following a fluid itinerary that allows them to float freely across deep time and present-day borders, defying the river as a line on the map. And while we traveled and focused on the Rhine River Delta specifically, the Rhine has also more and more become a boundary object for us, as the urgencies and the questions that we ask apply to other domains and geographies too. And I wanted to share a few moments and meetings and stories where the complexity of living with the river became very tangible. First of all, at the gravel pit at the Groeve Belveld, where we met. So there's it's a huge gravel pit that has been in operation for 35 years, and where we met with Joep, who has been excavating the forest for the last 35 years, who has become an expert on soil and deep time traveling, as he showed us how both the Rhine and also the Meuse rivers were once a confluence here, as it all was one water body, and how this can still be traced back through the stones and the gravel that are being excavated there. But we also visited Valkenburg, for instance, where we made a sound walk and where there had very recently been quite severe floodings, but where it seemed like nothing happened, like the doors were painted again as if nothing happened, which was a eerie walk in a way as well. But we also have been camping at Grieteroord, which is an island positioned between where the Rhine used to flow. So here you see an image of the old Rhine, which now more became a ditch, and also where the straightened version, more like the canal version, flows now, and this island is flooded almost every year around Christmas time. And here we learned from Judith, who lives here and who runs is an artist as well, and who also runs this camping place, how to live with this ubiquitous wetness on the houses, on the terps that are here on the Grieteroord island. But we also visited this very huge old brown coal mine, Hambach-Tagebouw, which will be transformed into a recreation area, where this giant wound in the landscape will be filled with Rhine River water in the future. So here we were actually listening to a future landscape of the river, but also to relentless capitalist exploitation and exhaustion. But we all brought a different lens to the river.
So this has also been a rehearsal in doing research together, because Loom as a collective, as a practice, we've been officially in operation, I think, since more or less 2 years. Renee, you know these things. 3 years. Oh my god. Yeah. So 3 years already. Which is a different story, but it was also an attempt to collectivize or to kind of scale up our more, let's say, freelance operations into a more broader operation, so to say, but also in search of a certain form of collectivity and solidarity. But this also brought together our individual backgrounds and interests, and this project has very much been an exercise in how to weave these interests and expertises together. So what we decided to do for the project was that each of us still focused on, let's say, one lens, and maybe it's nice to briefly introduce each of them. The first one being the ubiquitous river, which was Michiel's approach to this project. How would you summarize how you came to this?
It's such a complicated word, ubiquitous, you can pronounce it. But it's something we took, actually. We borrowed from, indeed, Dilip Cunha and Anuradha Mathur, who sadly passed away last year, but definitely worth looking into their work. And I got to know them. I've been taking classes with them, and the first question they asked at the start of the first class was, how can we inhabit a hurricane in a design school? So how can we inhabit a hurricane? Wow, are we going to inhabit a hurricane? Do we need to even consider that? But this was in the States, right, where it's becoming the norm in most places across that vast country to start preparing for these natural disasters. So how to inhabit a hurricane, that stuck with me, and when we started thinking about this project, it resurfaced and made me think, how can we inhabit a river? So if we're not facing hurricanes, but maybe we're facing catastrophic floods, how can we start imagining that we not separate ourselves from it and maybe move away from this binary approach of water, land, and especially in this country, when bring in the engineers, they will engineer us out of that situation. What if we start to accept the fact that we will be living in a condition of ubiquitous wetness, and what will that look like, and how can we do that collectively? So this was my approach. Also understanding the river as a colonial construct is another thing that Dilip and Anuradha suggested, that by mapping rivers, for example, drawing two lines on a piece of paper, all of a sudden it suggests that it's tamed, that it's controlled. and that you're safe from it. But what if we unsee the lines on the map and we start to see it more as a floodplain where water is coming from all directions? So that's the ubiquity in relation to the river.
Thank you. And I think we will. So in the end, no, I will say a little bit more about that later. This is an auditorium by Michiel, which is another thing that he brings to the table in our collaboration. How to live in a world of ubiquitous wetness. And then the next lens is the regenerative river, which is my lens, in fact. And this was about, I would say, material history and how to live with or at the expense of the land or of the ground. Because what's fascinating, for example, are these clay pits, which you can find along the river in these kind of floodplain landscapes, these riverine landscapes. They're basically like scars of which are the result of extraction, and in this case the brick specifically, bricks from which we construct houses. The brick was kind of the protagonist. This oil polder that Katia already mentioned was an area that was dotted with brickworks, with brick factories, which is basically another thing we came across was like a brick is like a river without water, because bricks are basically chunks of clay that are dried and fired using natural gas or emitting tons and tons of carbon. But I'm trying to summarize this, which is tricky. So this idea of regeneration, right? So historically, these floodplains would indeed flood during wintertime mostly, kind of regenerate the soil, also kind of preparing it for another season of agriculture. But then, let's say now there's more like high tech, or indeed more binary, so to say, water management systems like dikes in place, which kind of prevent this from happening. And at the same time, there's industrial agriculture, which exhausts the soil. So this regeneration is not really happening in that sense anymore. But when you look at places like this, these clay pits, these scars, so to say, they also show at the same time a form of regeneration, because they are among the most biodiverse places in the landscape now, this is precisely because they're like on the, let's say, on the border. They are this gradient between land and water, which is where most species tend to settle and interact, etc. And an extension of that is that there are now more, let's say, regenerative practices happening also in that area, but also more broadly in our culture, in relation to the land, in relation to our architecture. So yeah, that's something I've been focusing on and I'm still focusing on. This is an old brickworks, the one that you already mentioned. I think we will see another picture of it later for this collective, I think it was called the collective dream exercise. This is a chunk of clay. The unruly river. Renee, this is here.
Yeah. So maybe, indeed to again summarize it and keep it brief. But I think my lens kind of had the same kind of point of departure. But you were just mentioning that historically many rivers were these kind of wildly meandering as you can see in this image also, this kind of wildly meandering kind of water bodies with like fluid and porous boundaries, often where these like large floodplains where like rivers would also change over the course of time. And mostly in the 19th century, there was this kind of obsession with the idea that you could also like straighten these kind of rivers. And this happened with rivers around the world. And specifically also the Rhine River. And you can see this very well in this image. Down here you see like the new course of the Rhine. Here, yeah, just there, that was kind of created and completely turned this like wildly meandering queer water body into this optimized, controlled line on the map also, as Michiel was saying, that was really optimized also for trade and for industry and commerce, and completely destroyed also this, let's say, very flourishing ecological landscape and turned it into, let's say, infrastructure. And so I've been looking at this notion of straightening rivers, and maybe indeed as the water is coming from all sides, and with like the enormous amount of water that's going through rivers like the Rhine, trying to understand like how can we then accommodate for all this water. Maybe we should have like queer perspectives on creating new kind of riverine landscapes. So like maybe we should go beyond the idea of a river as a line and imagine new forms of broad new floodplains where the rivers can be themselves in many different ways. So there's much more to it, but here you can read it also in the zine, of course. Thank you.
Thanks, Suzanne. And this is then there's the embodied river, which is Rodna Röckling's approach or lens. Rodna couldn't be here today because she's curating an exhibition at Metro 54, which is opening on Thursday, I think, right? But yeah, so she was trying to find an approach that goes beyond the maps and the data, etc., and be more embodied in or along the river and in the places that we visited. So she was more interested in the bodily, the sensory, and the improvisational forms of research. So this included these collective walks and listening exercises, and the collective dream travel that you already kind of explained, and that took place here in this old field oven where bricks used to be fired in the 19th century. And I think what's also interesting about Rodna's practice is that she also puts her own practice in kind of a lineage of, let's say, more historical embodied art practices. And I think for those of you that listen to the podcast or to her part at the floating gardens today, you can kind of sense that. She also works with scores. I think these are also scores. Right?
And this was a writing exercise.
Ah, this is the writing exercise. Yeah.
Like fast.
Now missing. Yeah, writing improvisation. But yeah, resounding river.
I think there's some parts of all these lenses that I also took with me or that I brought, but I think I'm also interested in in the sonic dimension of it all. So I guess often when we orient ourselves in landscapes, it's through visual cues, but I'm interested also in how we talked already a lot about these rivers that have been straightened and optimized, but how can we maybe listen back to landscapes that have been erased around the Rhine River? And I live in Rotterdam, and I live close. I only learned about this a few years ago, that I live close to a place that used to be a beautiful bird breeding area. The Beer it was called, and it had been erased completely in the 60s to expand the harbor in Rotterdam, and it has now become the Tweede Maasvlakte, a very deserted, well not deserted, but has a very different eco system today. So this is how the landscape has been changed, but I'm also I was also inspired by feminist theorist Tina Kemp, who wrote this beautiful book on listening to images and listen for low frequencies in archives. And maybe I took that idea a bit with like how can we listen back to landscapes that have been altered and erased, and is it possible to listen back, but also maybe into the future. So this is again at the Tagebouw Hambach mine, which is maybe becoming one of the future landscapes of the Rhine River. But we were also listening to this wound in the landscape. And I'm also curious how through field recording and soundscapes where actually, as opposed to maybe maps, we can actually listen to different temporalities and different localities simultaneously. So how that, and that's an ongoing question, I guess. And what we did actually after this journey, we were reflecting together on the journey that we made, and like also positioning our lenses together, and we made this first like public rehearsal at the Goethe Institute. Was it May or March? Time is passing in very weird ways, but this where we also like introduced the different lenses that we brought to the river, and we're interested in this, and that's actually something we want to discuss with you, these different methodologies or forms of engaging with these questions. So we brought different objects, sonic material, but we also invited two guests that each brought a different perspective. There was Dirk Simons, a landscape architect, who actually was the main architect of the Room for the River program to provide more space for major rivers to manage the higher water levels in the Delta area in the Netherlands, which has been quite successful, but also has to be updated, or we need to think beyond that as well. But also we invited multidisciplinary artist Zara Malkani, who explores dissident ecological knowledges and environmental resistance. And she's from Karachi, where she founded a school which explores struggles around land and water there. So how through we took this form of a dress rehearsal, can we collectively also practice other approaches and understandings of the river? But maybe something that we also wanted to bring is more a bit like sort of the making of, or the figuring things out in the back.
Yeah, this kind of ghostly image of us walking on water, I guess.
Yeah, and I think maybe to say also that our practice involves a lot of trying things out and testing things, and I guess also with the rehearsal before, and also with the cahier that we present, not to do research for many years and then maybe bring something, but to have an ongoing conversation where many different voices can also sort of leak into what we hope becomes something bigger and will resonate further. But it often involves very basic materials that we bring on walks, and then
different tryouts for the design of the cahier that's on the table now. Some mistakes.
Mistakes. Sending stuff around.
That's a lot of work, actually, right?
Yeah. So also
mostly you doing it. Yeah.
I've been sending this guy already to people in different territories over the last weeks. And a writing practice is maybe also.
Yeah. Well, this is just a screenshot of a historical version of the text that's inside, where you can kind of see that we are trying to find our collective language for this for this topic. And I think maybe now, because when did we work on the cahier? This was, I think we finalized it in March or something. Yeah, I'm also interested that maybe next time we will not, do these more individual 5 lenses, but we will manage to weave them even more spreads from the final publication, which is on the table. And you can, if you would like a copy, you can purchase one, but €20 because it's expensive to do these things. But You can also send us an email and then we can send you the PDF for free. Yeah.
The print's also nice. Yeah.
Print is nice, but yeah.
And maybe, yeah, so we like to work through like printed matter, as you can see. This idea of the rehearsal, that is something that we update all the time, you could say. And one thing that we've been doing a lot since a few years now is to always come back to what we now started calling wetness walks, which was started by Michiel and René together with Rietveld students as well. In 4 days, where you walked from Amsterdam to the Zeedijk to the sea, to IJmuiden. Do you wanna maybe? Okay, yeah, well, that's what you went to the sea. Then we also departed one day from the Goethe Institute at the Herengracht to the Amstel River and to the highest parts of Amsterdam and to the I River, where we took different like measuring instruments and we were comparing water from different water bodies. We also again gathered at this the Braunkoolmijn, the Handbachtagebouwmijn, where we were engaging more with deep time, discussing how the area was once, of course, water, how fossils have formed over time, and how we have been excavating and exploiting the landscape for fossil fuels, and now how this landscape again will turn into a water body if the plans proceed. But we also went with CIS students. I don't know if some are still here. So last year we also made a wetness walk with the Studio for Immediate Spaces at close to where we live in Rotterdam at the Noordereiland, which is also flooded almost every year. And this is like what is called buitendijksgebied. There's many of those areas in the lands that are not protected by dikes. And actually it's interesting to see how communities organize themselves. So they have like a community center where they talk or gather a lot about how to collectively prepare for the water that is coming, but also engage with conversations with the municipality and asking, is it worth it to save this island on the long term? So these are, of course, are more long-term questions.
But a fascinating case, like in the middle of Rotterdam, basically, this part of the city where all these questions emerge and are very close, right? A lot of these things that we kind of hint at seem like they're decades into the future for the Netherlands at least, but this area floods each year, every year. Part of the island is just, it's underwater from the river.
Which leads us to Leaky Turns.
Yes, which a lot of you listened to today. Was actually at the invitation of the research group of Laura and Patricia to it was a question to us, like, can you create an audio thingy that kind of captures what has happened within this residency, and also a little bit beyond that within the research group and adjacent practices from Müge and Anne. And I think this is super interesting to us because we have some experience I have some experience with audio. Katia has a lot of experience with audio and sound, and Ratna as well. To think of different ways to communicate or to help get a certain message across, and also to maybe speaking more for myself, but you may agree. We think that the quality of audio is that it can create certain very intimate, focused conversations or insights or ways of consuming something. And what we also like, I think, is that there's the absence of images. So that it can help you imagine things in different ways. And specifically what we try to do for this thing is really localize the audio. So basically do a podcast that is also connected to all these places in the city that you can go and visit, and you can use the audio to to think about this place or to experience it, to listen to it in different ways. This is where we currently are, which is great, right? Because this is kind of where all these things are happening right now, and that was only half a year ago.
Yeah, so when we met here with Muga, who is one of the participants or artists in the audio tour, there was no garden yet. Maybe also nice to say that there's both for each like lens or story and location, there's both a listening exercise and then an interview with the person that is. So each of us chose a spot that is really very close to a body of water, and it has connection to our perspective and different histories as well. I think we skipped the listening. So those who haven't listened yet, you can still listen to it later.
You can find it in your favorite podcast app.
Oh yeah. So maybe I wanted to end with maybe a quote from the cahier, and then with that we would like to also open up to you all, because maybe do that first, or do you want to have people
this is no, I'd also be curious to hear from you, from people who joined this afternoon, like what was it like? Because it was also a little bit weird, right? We did a short introduction at 2:30, and from then on everybody just kind of disappeared in their headphones, and we didn't talk to most of you. So what was it like? And what was it? How did it resonate with you to go to these places with these people in your headphones in this way?
I would say it was interesting. If you think of that, you were actually at the place and you were there as well, actually what you were saying, and then you try to listen, but then you hear all those layers on top of each other. So when you were there, you were hearing the sounds, but almost the same, slightly different. You were hearing other sounds, and I thought that was interesting that you already get a time lapse in a way, or that although I would have been at the same place, probably I would also not have heard exactly the same. And now that was also overlapping in a way. I thought that was very interesting. And I was also very curious. That was more about, I think, the listening exercise, but from the other one I get so many questions, and so many questions were asked. That was just very curious what would come next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Maybe just like responding on the first thing, with the listening exercise, we discussed a lot whether or not to have, because we made a lot of field recordings on the days that we were actually recording the place and having the conversations with everyone up here, to whether or not to have like those field recordings there or not, or that you would just put down your headphones and then listen to the actual space. So we also encourage people to do that as well. But of course you can also listen to it when you're not physically in that location. So then we wanted to bring that space as well. And maybe we also use, for instance, different microphones so with the listening exercise, you hear microphones that are really for field recording. So you're more embedded in that location, perhaps. You have more of this environment that you're hopefully immersed in. And then with the interview, it was more focused on this voice or perspective that the person is bringing. And the what is next question, we will also repeat. But maybe we end with that. If there was another experience you would like to share. Was it nice to just listen, or was it annoying? Yeah?
It's really nice. At one point, I feel like someone always makes a mistake. I made a mistake and I listened to one, I just mixed them up.
It will also work.
Yeah, did everybody? Oh, right, cool. But one of them, nice, okay, I wasn't alone. But one of the nicest things about that is that when I went to another space, I had to recall. Like I don't know. I was like, then I was really called into action, and that's I'm always kind of thinking like, with this kind of thing as well, like the kind of what's next question, like what is the call for action, and that was an action itself. Like I was really activated to be like, oh shit, like what was that, and what did I see, and what did I retain. And then why did that part stick with me? And like, I don't know, like my brain started working a little bit differently just because of like a mistake. And that's also interesting.
I think you were not the only one.
Yeah.
To different...
So I hear. But then it just made me start thinking about memory and that was kind of nice as well. Yeah. And like the kind of blurry boundaries of space as well, where I'm like, well, it could be is it the right one? And then like I was kind of looking for the garden across, and I was like, maybe that is the garden over there. And I'm just the porous boundaries of space as well. But, it's nice.
Maybe what I also really enjoyed is that we were so kind of swarming collectively, and then in different like sometimes as a bigger group and sometimes smaller. That a lot of people came to me like, what is happening? Is it a performance, or what is so interesting about this place? Or some people ask like, is the bridge open because you're all waiting, or is it? So there a lot of things also happen because of your presence and your very focused presence as well. And also, I just met the wife of Ari Taal, who actually started the floating gardens, and I got her phone number. So if we ever want to enter the floating gardens that Radna is actually speaking about in her part of the story, we can do that. So maybe we can. That's maybe one of the what is next things, or promote like invitations to continue that. Any other responses or thoughts?
I enjoyed the group moment that you invited everybody to come on this tour today, because I guess you can also take the tour by yourself in your own time, or just do a couple of spots or stations. But offering this like group moment, the way you describe it as well, it's like a swarm, and some might be moving a bit faster, others a bit slower, and really invites everybody to take the time to listen, because that's something very precious.
I think that's why Lara's exercise, breathing exercise, was also very nice at the start. And I think it relates to also the ways in which we like to do research, but also different, installments or ways of, being involved in different schools, education. We like to go out a lot, so not be in these dull and kind of hard to breathe in classrooms, but go out into the real world, into the locations that we talk about, that we like to learn about. So I think it's also a bit of an extension of that, and that's why I think it was super nice that there were basically some classes joining us today as well.
Maybe I can end with a little. With the Rhine River rehearsal, we made an attempt to get closer to the river, while at the same time continuously departing from a dominant narrative, a clear line, a defined territory. Our journey has formed from personal fascinations, pressing issues, and striking markings in the surrounding landscape. Wounds of extraction, places recently flooded, a mythical rock. We slowed down, sped up, read, spoke, listened, swam. We experienced traces of deep time and imagined possible futures. Physically, we traveled from Alphen aan de Rijn to St. Gorshausen in a few days, but mentally we traveled further, to childhood memories, to the Pleistocene, to the Mississippi River, to the Indus Delta and the atmospheric rivers yet to come. We have traveled with each of us carrying different sets of knowledge. Although we might not call ourselves water management experts, we do share ideas about the omnipresence of wetness, and the question of how to live with water has long been present in our work. And at the same time, we have also traveled as concerned inhabitants of this planet at this moment in time, where, like many others, we feel a different relationship to the environment is necessary. In this sense, the rehearsal invites us not to turn away from the river and look away from the inevitable, but instead to join an exercise in coexistence, a reconciliation. Taming or straightening the river is not a solution in times of climate crisis, Rather, the river asks us to move with its fluid flow and partly unpredictable energy. This requires porosity, improvisation, a time for awareness and collaboration. And with the Rhine River rehearsal, we have taken a first step in practicing living with the river otherwise. And in the coming years, we intend to expand this practice in time and skill, rehearsing with many others together, and also hopefully with you. So, thank you for that.
Can I maybe respond
Yes.
to the what's next question?
Yes.
I mean, the easy one out would be to ask you what you think could be next, but let me speculate on it myself. But by phrasing it maybe as a question to all of you, because I'm really curious. Because if you would read this, if you listen to the podcast, I think it's also quite bleak, right? I think we start from an understanding that it's inevitable that the water will come looking for us, right? That we have to kind of give up this idea that we're safe and that the government will protect us. So it's kind of a survivor mode that we put you in a way, to an extent, which I think is an interesting larger trend. And I just returned from something which is called collapse camp, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which also goes in, I mean, what's in the name? You
Yeah,
probably have a...
Should I say something?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this is quite an interesting movement, and it's like a part of, let's say, the larger climate movement, which is breaking away from the climate movement, and is like ditching the idea of global climate justice, and is moving towards notions of collective prepping. So not prepping as an individual, often kind of this masculine kind of idea of your own bunker and like the world will go down and you will be there, but like collectively prepare for what's to come. And I feel this might indeed also be an interesting narrative for like what's next in preparing for the coming water, right? Like collectively organize ourselves around the unexpected trajectories of water going in all directions.
Yeah, and so to maybe build on that, thinking about what could be next, I think it's also good to acknowledge that we've shifted away also in our own understanding of the subject that we're studying. In a sense, I think we were also more interested to get noticed by policymakers, and that we would offer something to the people, like the engineers that are actually reshaping the landscape as we speak. But I think because of all of this, I think we've come to understand that maybe what we can offer is something way more dramatic, in a way, right? Unless you frame it differently, when it becomes more of a collective preparation for a disaster to come. Which is not what they want to hear, right? It's not at all what our government or any government at this moment is thinking of in terms of policy. So I think we're at a point now where we also have to kind of regroup and re-strategize how are we going to approach this subject. So I think maybe we're a bit lost, potentially, which I think is also good, right? So I cannot give a clear answer, but it's quite fundamental, I would say, what lies ahead of us. And what I really believe, and this, so maybe you can respond to what I was just saying, but also this idea of self-generative projects, to not aim for a clear goal or funnel everything into a funding application, but just start something and then things flow, to stick to the river metaphor, things flow from it. I think this is what this project has meant for us, and I'm pretty sure that this is what it will bring also in the future. So it will carry us to places where we cannot think of right now. I know, but maybe some of you would like to speculate on this collapse idea, or to maybe not be overly optimistic that there's much you can do to avert the climate crisis, but instead, through, for example, engaging with such a thing as a river, that you can start to behave differently and also start to organize collectively. I'm just curious, like you also, a lot of you being from a younger generation, I would say, if this is an attempting proposition.
I was thinking of a question that the Onkruidenier, also Art Collective, asked, like if you could be a salt-loving community, as in the latest podcast was also said from you. That that there's much more life and everything in a salt water than in sweet water, and that is just how you look at it. I thought it was very interesting thing. What actually climate crisis is. I thought that, and I'm curious if we can become one I thought was also very interesting to hear once that wat is het called? Een zoet. Wat? Nee. Je hebt een plant die we alleen maar groeien op zoete grond. Maar dat die eigenlijk vanuit het zout water komt, maar dat we nu hem alleen in de zoete variant eten. Maar ik ben echt vergeten hoe die heet. Maar dat,
A specific plant.
A really specific plant that has also something with sweet in the name. But I thought that was very interesting that it used to be salt and we could eat it as a human as well, but it was just easier to do that on.
I see Muga already because it's actually really nice that you bring this up because I wanted to ask maybe Muga also in terms of what is next, like your research, which we can listen to like just a fragment of it also in the podcast.
Yeah, so there's a booklet also. My research also ended up with the publishing. A small booklet where there are actually all the salt-loving and salt-tolerant plants together with fictional ones. So I don't think the plant you're talking about is in the book because I would probably remember it. But I think for us is to continue grow things, basically. Like also here we will hopefully continue. But I'm also very much interested in the idea of the prepping. We will also soon make a reading group about the preparations from a science fiction perspective, so speculations about the future, but also our question is always like, what can we do? So what are the things that we should be doing on a very practical level? So these will be really survival skills, recognizing edible plants and really knowing how to live without technology, or actually at least be able to do so. So this kind of really realistic, really practical knowledges, this is the direction that we are going.
I also feel that we are already in kind of collective prepping environment here at the Brooklyn Plaza with your garden there. And,
Yes.
And the workshop.
Yes.
I like how you say, how you're mentioning being realistic. So it's not necessarily pessimistic or bleak. It's just something I was just wondering, like, should it be, or will it be, let's say, joyless or indeed bleak? Because collapse does sound bleak, but I mean, there can also be a lot of value in this collective prepping, right? In this collective, imagining.
We are actually reading a book of Joyful Militancy.
Oh yes. Always good
Yeah.
to recommend.
Yes. For working collectively, how to like get along with each other in general, because being a community and being a collective is not easy at all. But also how to not lose your joy despite climate collapse and rise of fascism, for example.
Yeah.
And it's actually essential.
Thank you for that.
Feeling and to always come down to having fun together, despite everything. It's a really useful book.
You can put it in your pocket. It's very small, so very useful to bring it along.
Would it be an idea to find some collective joy with some food as well, and to continue the conversation with little bites?
Yes.
I invite you all to move towards the beautiful dome tent where Laila will be serving some warm and less warm snacks.